And for those of you who are joining us, I just want to welcome Mike Milligan. He is the broker owner of Century 21 Emerald. He is also a NAR certified expert negotiator. Excited to have him here today. He's a wealth of information, and I will let him take it away. Welcome. And by the way, I've been joking that many of the top trainers in the country are Irish, because my grandparents came from Ireland, and Brian Buffini is the top guy in the world. And he came over from Ireland as a house painter before becoming a superstar agent. And of course, Milligan's a good Irish name. So
good Irish name, yes, sir.
True. Welcome, and I will let you take over and take your stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon. So thank you, everybody. I expect to have a couple of other people join as well. But let's get started into the world of negotiations. I am trying to figure out how to do this on my touch screen. There we go. So a little bit about me is that I started in real estate in 2009. And before that, I was the senior vice president of marketing at Bank of America. One of the requirements of the executive position there was to become a certified negotiations expert. So I spent several weeks at the Shapiro Negotiations Institute in Baltimore, Maryland, to understand more of negotiations. And it really has become a skill that I feel that everyone needs, and everyone in every industry should have for at least a base level knowledge to understand how to navigate through areas that become uncomfortable for yourself or your clients. Again, I began in real estate in 2009, and then by 2010, I was the #1 agent in my office. And it was rather strange to me that someone so new could step in and kind of rise to the top so quickly. And I learned that a lot of it was because a lot of realtors did not understand negotiating principles. So I built a small team in that office. We started doing a pretty decent amount of sales. And then in 2014, the required 5 years you need to wait in the state of Delaware in order to get your broker's license. I got my broker's license, and then the following year I branched out on my own to open up Century 21 Emerald, and now we manage several offices. And in 2019, NAR created this class called the RENE, which is the Real Estate Negotiations Expert, and I spent 4 days taking that class and wanted to really understand how the tools that I had learned previously translate into this industry. And it was pretty similar with some very good anecdotal stuff about how you navigate through very specific negotiations. So let's begin. This is something that I've stolen from Tom Ferry. Tom Ferry says that this is how your clients see you. This is how clients see every real estate agent, is that they're all relatively the same. They all have slightly different flavor, but there's really not much differentiating one real estate agent from another. And what you need to do is develop tools that will allow you to differentiate yourself. This is taken directly from Zillow.com. Is this what clients are interested in? What do clients need from their real estate agent? And the first thing that they need is they need your network. They need your connection with other realtors in your market. They also need your knowledge and experience to get through the process, unscathed, a little more knowledgeable in the end of themselves about the beginning and end of how this began to sell, the marketing that went into it, all of the pieces of this that gets them to the final sale. But number 3 in the list of Zillow is very, very interesting, is that they need you to lead contract negotiations. They need someone who is skilled to help them, the unskilled person, which is why you were hired. You are the professional. You are the most knowledgeable. You have the most experience doing this. You should be able to navigate them through the negotiations process. And by that, I come across a lot of realtors who believe that, they read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, and they feel like they are expert negotiators now. And we have to understand that, while I thought that book was very, very interesting, we're not negotiating for people's lives here like an FBI hostage negotiator is. So we have to understand that we have to keep avenues open in order to negotiate, in order to come to the best result for our client. So one of the facts of all of this that I've learned in the real estate world is that you can hire a photographer, you can hire a videographer, an SEO expert, social media assistant, and 9 times out of 10, your client will never even know that you're not doing these tasks. But you cannot outsource negotiations. When you're pressed by your client on what to do, here's the offer, these are the terms, this is what they're asking, this is where they're pressuring you, they need a response in 24 hours, they want to settle in 2 days, you can't defer to someone else. This is a skill you absolutely need to be a sales professional and separate yourself from other realtors. So part of what we want to go through is, I want to kind of tee this up a little bit to say that the fact that you're here says a lot about you, is that you want to learn, you want to be better, and you also understand that this is absolutely a tool that can differentiate you from other realtors. Because if you think about this, the first negotiation you have with a seller is virtually against the seller. You're trying to list their home. They're going to try to ask you to list it for more, but you have to negotiate to be a reasonable number. They're going to ask you to do it for a lower percentage, which you have to negotiate to a reasonable number, one that's fair and agreed upon by everyone. And if you can prove that you can negotiate that fairly and you can negotiate that firmly against your client, you have a client for life. Once you get that listing, they know that you know how to negotiate, and you're going to negotiate in their best interest for every offer that comes in, for every showing that happens, and everything along the way. So remember, there's so many times when you go into a listing presentation, and I want to kind of bring this real world, is you go into a listing presentation and they say, well, Joe down the street will do it for 4%, so I may just go with him. How would you handle that type of negotiation? Anyone? What's the first thing that your mind goes through immediately? And if no one wants to answer, I'll answer on your behalf, is that people immediately, they get pissed. They immediately say, so that's, they're downplaying the importance of the role that I play. And really what they're doing is they're testing you, and they're asking you, show me the importance of the role that you play. So when you are in these negotiations, you have to think of it from not only what are they saying, but what are they trying to say. So some of the tools that we use all the time when you're talking to someone in negotiations is that you are constantly probing for more information to find out when someone has, if there's 100 options on the table, and again, let's bring this real world about someone submits an offer and it has a decent price and a good settlement date, and they need settlement assistance, and they want the washer and dryer. You need to have a conversation with that other agent, and you need to ask them, tell me more about that. Why is the washer and dryer important to them? And when you ask questions like that, you're going to get a story. You're going to get that they're moving from South Carolina to here, and it's bulky to move, and they're having a friend help them. And you're going to understand a lot more about what's going on with the other party that will help you frame the conversation you have with your client, the seller. And all of these questions are designed so that you can understand how important things are. When you say, what makes this so important to you? Why must you have this washer and dryer? You'll really understand that this means a lot more than a washer and dryer. Why are you not flexible on that? And you'll get the one we have is old. These ones were really new, and they thought they were cool. They were front loading ones, whatever it may be. But You have to continue to ask questions that goes below the surface. Anyone, this is what I learned in 2009 when I joined the industry to 2010 when I became the top agent in my office, which was anyone, any agent can take an offer and hand it to their client and say, what do you think? Not explaining it, not going through the details, not going through options, not telling them that, look, I spoke to the other client and I know that you didn't want to give up your brand new, Samsung $2,500 refrigerator, but that is the linchpin in all of this, is that they really like the house, but this is the one thing that's non-negotiable. If you take that out of the equation, they're not buying your house. You have to be able to show them that you've put in the time and you've done the work, and you can explain this to them in a way that helps them understand. That takes you to the top 5%, the top 1% of your industry very, very quickly, because once that person settles on their home, they refer everyone to you because you're the expert. They're looking at you to be the expert, so you need to be that for them. So the one question that you need to save is, what is your plan B? So you have to save this for the right time, and we'll get into exactly that time in a moment. So these phrases are, they show one, and Wendy, there's a little background noise from Wendy, so I'm going to mute you, Wendy. So the phrases show that you are listening. When you are having a conversation with them about the things that are important to them, it shows to them that you're listening. And to be perfectly honest, it's very selfish. You're trying to probe and get more information from them on why this makes this important. So it's very selfish for you in terms of knowledge without the appearance of being selfish. It appears that you're listening, which you are. It appears that you are asking the right questions, which you are, but you're doing it in a way so that you have the information so that you can negotiate best on their behalf. So I want to talk about these three things right here. There are three bargaining formats, they're called. When you are negotiating, there are three different ways to do it. And I'm going to put them all up here for the time being so we can see them. Is that one is positional bargaining, which is, it's a competitive stance and it's demanding. You're selling your house for $300,000. I will give you $250,000. Take it or leave it. I'll settle in a week. That is a win-lose situation or a lose-lose situation all the time. Someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. And this was explained years ago to me, is that there's a way to win without having the person lying prone on the ground with your foot on their chest, flexing your muscles. There's a way to win where you can shake hands and say, I think that this worked out well. And that's the win-win that we're really going for. And I'll explain later on how all of that ties together as well, because it's really important, is that you have to win, but not win in a way that totally demeans and degrades your opponent so that they felt that they totally lost and you took advantage of them. And a lot of people use the stance of going to a car dealership and they feel like they were just sold this car and they just had no choice. They just had to buy it, and they left with the car, but they didn't really feel like it worked out for them. That's a win-lose situation. Value negotiating. So a cooperative stance using partnering for a win-win without compromising a client's needs or wants. So in those earlier conversations where you're probing and getting deeper, listening, trying to find out why these things are so important, you have to now find a way to cooperate with the negotiating partner and figure out how to best get through all of this without compromising the things that your clients said that they needed to leave with. We all know when someone lists their house at $300,000 and they demand that they have to have $300,000, that they're not flexible on that at all. If you ask questions enough, you'll get to why that's important to them, why that number is so important. Hypothetical bargaining. Exploratory exercises with the other negotiator that doesn't commit anything. It's constantly well, if we were to give you $290, 100% cash, not worried about the appraisal, and we could settle in 2 weeks because your client needs to move, is that something you could be okay with? That's the type of exploratory exercise that seasoned negotiators go through all of the time. So this area here, this positional bargaining, as soon as someone positions something like this, take it or leave it, I immediately know that they are an untrained negotiator. There is no way someone who is a seasoned or trained negotiator would ever put something in this manner, because we all know that 99% of the time, it never comes to anything. It really becomes a dominant stance to say, I could do this if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to offer something ridiculous and it's not going to happen. So it's very interesting when this happens, is that you chuckle a little bit and you say, let me talk to my client and see what they say. And yeah, I'll get back to you. And 99 times out of 100, they get back to them with an answer that is absolutely not. We're going to do what we need to do in order to never speak to you again. And unfortunately, that's the route that it eventually goes, is that now you've made someone so upset that they not only don't want to negotiate with you, they hate you. They hate you for the stance that you've taken. So it becomes extremely difficult to move past that once you've gotten there. So when you're dealing in value negotiating and hypothetical bargaining, this is where the skilled negotiators play. When you offer something and you are genuine in your approach and you understand that I have something to give, they need something to give, while we may not be 100% on board with every facet of this, we're going to cycle through options and figure out how we can make this work. I'm going to give up this so that you get that, but you have to also do what we said before. You have to constantly explore what is important. Is $300,000 the most important? Or do you need to move in a month? Because if I need to buy that house before I sell my house, there may be some financial implications to me. So then I can't offer you $300,000. I'll offer you this. So I can help you get to that goal, but you're going to sacrifice something on this goal. And that's where skilled negotiators are constantly having conversations. And there's nothing I enjoy more than when I'm talking to another real estate agent who is a skilled negotiator. We both don't take it personally. We both don't get upset. They present what their client is willing to do, and they'll give me a little background without sacrificing the stance of their client. And I will say, let me take it to my client, have that conversation, come back to them. This is where we are. We go through a couple of cycles of options. They'll take it to their client. We get it to, and I would say 95% of the time, it works out into something that's agreeable to all parties. You're at the settlement table, shaking hands, high-fiving. Your clients are exchanging email addresses because they actually like each other. They actually get to a point where they're happy to turn their home over to someone else, and it becomes a very pleasant experience for everyone involved. And what do you know? You get referred by them as a negotiating expert, a solid professional in your field. And there's nothing better to be called in any field. So does anyone have any questions so far? I don't want this to be a monologue. I also needed a sip of coffee. So let's go through this exercise in a real world environment. You have an elderly seller client you absolutely love and have a great relationship with. You have their house listed for a little less than a week at $200,000, but they need to sell for no less than $190,000 to net enough money in order to move where they want. So which offer do you feel will be most likely to end in a completed agreement? So someone emails you an offer, they don't call you, the purchase price is $180,000, standard inclusions, $1,000 deposit. They make it clear that this is their first, last, and final offer. So your first opinion of that would typically be, I appreciate the offer. It's less than what they said that they needed, and and let's figure out how we could negotiate that in a way that could solve anything. So when someone says first, last, and final offer, at the initial outset, it's a little scary because it becomes a very dominant stance in a negotiation that is just not fair to everyone involved. So it's my job at that point to kind of educate the other agent to say, hey, why don't we figure out a way to work through this other than being so demanding? Offer number 2, emailed offer. Purchase price is $175. Standard inclusion, standard inspection, $1,000 deposit, the same. Plus, the buyer's agent called and said that their client is a young couple and they love the home and they can see themselves raising a family there. They're renting at the moment, but they just really don't have a whole lot of money right now to really purchase something in the 200,000. You know, which of these do you feel would be most likely to end in an agreement? You know, and it's pretty extreme cases. So
Neither.
why would you say neither?
Well, if he has a loan and he has to pay off the mortgage, he can't do it less than 190. I mean, there's a reason why he picked that price.
Well,
plus he has to pay the commission.
Okay. All things that are negotiable. So that's when you get to a stance of tell me why you have to net 190 in order to move. And if they have a loan and they're going to be upside down and coming to the table, then you have to cycle through other options. Do you have a sizable retirement where you could pay in order to sell your home at 175? Are you willing to cut your commission in order to make this happen? That's also a situation that they're going to ask you to do for sure.
Yeah, but it's not enough. You know, they've done their homework to come to that number. So,
but here's my point is that you need to cycle through every single option available. Is it possible the other people could come up to 185? Maybe. Is that enough to make it happen? If it's within $5,000 now, is the seller willing to bring $5,000 to the table?
Or he could take the one, or he could take it and just not do any of the inspections and just take it as is.
That's a great point. So, Robert, what you're doing now is starting to choose options. You're starting to go through, all right, these are all of the other things that go into the sale of this. What are the options that are really going to get us both to where we want to be? And don't think for a minute that the small little phone call conversation doesn't go a long way in getting to the heart of the seller to say, look, we're a young couple. We'd like to raise a family there just like you did, versus I'm an investor. I'll take your property, 180,000, and take it or leave it. Money may not be the most important thing in this negotiation.
Keep it on the market.
That's another option. And that's a great option because it's something that we're going to discuss in a little bit, considered a kind of like what's the plan B. So we talked about earlier those tools about how to ask questions about tell me a little bit more. The one question you always have to keep in your back pocket is when you negotiate this at 175 and let's say you get them to 185 and they need to have 190, you're still within 5,000. That's the point. Go ahead.
You have to explain it to the seller. It's a seller's market. So, and if the guy at 180, I mean, if he's that close, he'll go to the 190. I mean,
if he can,
and just tell him no. We'll put it back in the market, and you lost the house. Period.
So,
it's called tough negotiations.
It's not tough negotiation. So the stance that you've just taken is one that should never be taken, which is you never say, this is what we have to get, and we put it back on the market. You go through every single option available to make it work. Now, if you do get to a point where, like I said, you get them to 185, but they're still demanding the 190, and they can't come with more money, yada, yada, yada. There's no way that this is going to happen. You've exhausted every single option that's out there, and you're still $5,000 apart. That's when you have to say, now that you're at this position, what if we were to turn them down and say we cannot accept 185 given all these options? What is your plan B?
You could cut your commission by, depending where you were, from 6 to 5.5. So you cut to meet them halfway.
Meeting them halfway, I don't know, is a great negotiating tactic. It is one.
But it's money. It's all about the money.
It's not all about the money. That's the entire point about this conversation is about, even though someone tells you it's all about the money, it may not be all about the money. It's your job to ask the right questions and probe to get to where you need to be in order to get this home sold. And they may do it for 185 if they take their refrigerator with them, or if the other party settles a month later so they have time to do what they need to do wherever they're going. So it's very difficult to get to a point where it is throw your hands up in the air, this is not going to work out. The only time that I have ever done that is if someone comes in with their first offer, $300,000, I'm going to offer $200,000 because I know the story behind this house. Everybody thinks they know the story behind the house, and the husband passed away and the wife is there and she can't afford it. So I'm going to take advantage of that situation. Well, that's the part where your client needs you the most in order to negotiate. That's when I would throw my hands up and say that that's just not acceptable. But to your point, Robert, this is where we are in terms of we've gotten to a point where we're negotiating a deal. We've gotten to as far as we can. And we have to now understand what is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If we cannot get to a negotiated agreement and we've exhausted every possible means to get there, then why are we there, and what do we need to do from this point forward? And in our industry, to your point, agents are very, very quick to say that's not enough, they won't take it, put it back on the market. All you're doing is delaying the sale for the seller and yourself. So in order for us to negotiate on their behalf, we need to know the price they no longer want this transaction and what needs to stay or go at that price. So at 185, maybe they keep the washer and dryer and the refrigerator, and that's $5,000 worth of appliances that they'll take with them, and to them that sounds reasonable. Maybe they don't split the transfer costs. Maybe you have to figure out how you get to these numbers. But in the end, you find out everyone, and you have to listen. You have to constantly probe and ask questions and listen carefully for the clues. And sometimes, like I said, those clues could contradict what's being told to you. Maybe 190 isn't it. And then you have to address the conflict immediately. And I'll give you an example of that. Is that this is an actual conversation that I've had with a client. You've told me you wouldn't accept anything less than $300,000 for your home, but you said you wanted to be in Asheville, North Carolina when your grandson was born around July 1st. So how important is $300,000 to you to potentially miss the birth of your first grandchild? Are you telling me at $299 you would miss the birth of your grandson? That is understanding these two conflicting messages, addressing them immediately, and then painting a picture that you're being very, very hard on this number. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I just need to know why. And if that person told me that they could not move unless they made $300,000 on the sale of this house, and they were willing to miss the birth of their first grandchild, I would say that $300,000 is pretty darn important to them. Would you agree? And as this turned out, is that this person took a lot less than $300,000 because that was the birth of their grandchild was the most important thing to them. We took a little bit less. It was priced a little higher than the market was going to bear anyway. Helped them understand that. Of course, every seller believes that their home is the best in the neighborhood and it should garner more. And we got to a place that they were extremely happy and referred to me just about every member of their family because it was done professionally. I asked the right questions, and in the end, they were exactly where they wanted to be at the time they wanted to be. So we're now going to go through the Harvard Law School program on negotiations. Trained negotiators should do 4 things. List your alternatives. Think about all the alternatives that are available. If these current negotiations end in an impasse, this is your offer, this is your amount, this is what we're willing to do, you need to have in your quiver 10 other arrows that you can use to say, what about that? How do we do that? Can we do this? Always evaluate these alternatives. And sure, putting it back on the market is an alternative. But to the point of we get to a negotiation and someone can't do this, and then you put it back on the market, and now what if you start getting even lower offers? And now is the client going to be very happy with you that you said to them that we should put it back on the market? And now they aren't getting offers that were there in front of them to begin with, and now that person's gone. You need to be able to go through all of these alternatives. Establish the BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Choose a course of actions that would get the highest expected value for your client. And sometimes that is putting it back on the market. If you put it back on the market and 2 weeks later you get an offer that was right what they wanted, you look like a genius. You have to make sure that they understand that this is as low as we're going to go. These are the options that we pursued. And now that we've gone through all of those, this is your best alternative.
Have you given them any comps to show them some reality?
Yeah, that certainly helps. I mean, all of this, that's a great point, Robert, is that if you're getting to a point where you aren't getting the negotiated value that you wanted, then you have to use data to show them that this is the direction the market is headed. And maybe in a different time, right now it's a huge seller's market, but if in a different time, houses are languishing on the market a little longer. You know, they used to sell in 40 days, now they're selling in 65 days. It's going to take you longer. Are you willing to wait longer in order to get what you want? Houses are selling for a little bit less. So even though we listed it at 200, then maybe 190 isn't the real number. But you need to have the difficult conversation to go over those comps after you've already had the original conversation with them about comps and why you listed it at 200,000. So a lot of folks are unwilling to do that. And it's a great point that you bring that up, Robert, is once I have a conversation with a seller that I say your house is worth $200,000 and we want to sell your house for $200,000, if the best that you can get is 190, you're comfortable with that, great. I think that's exactly where we should be. And now 6 weeks goes by, you don't have an offer, and you have several showings, and you're getting some negative feedback that the price is too high. You have to go back in and say, this is where we were when we started. The market has shifted slightly in this period of time, and this is where we are now. A lot of folks are just going to cross their fingers and hope they get an offer sometime quickly before that client gets mad at them. I can't stress enough that it's always best to stay in touch with your clients, face the music that things aren't going the way you wanted, and try to understand alternatives. You have to, the whole point of this conversation is always know your alternatives and know what options you have at your disposal. And the better you start exploring those, the better you'll understand your client, you'll better understand how in the end they'll be happy. So the reserve value is the lowest value they're willing to accept. And like we said, with week 200 and 190, even though they tell you 190 is the number, it still may not be. It still may not be. So I mentioned earlier that there's part of the negotiations is not only with your client, but with the other negotiators as well, is that, I try to use this baseball analogy, is that there are 9 innings in a baseball game. When you list a property, you're going to get several opportunities in order to negotiate. Sometimes you have several opportunities with the same offer. Sometimes it's going to be multiple offers and multiple negotiations going on at one time, you know. So during each game, you're going to have several at bats. You're going to have several chances to go through these options with people. Some of them are going to be home runs and some of them won't. Some of them you're going to say, what if we were to move back the settlement date to December because my clients are taking some time to move, but we still want full price? They're going to say, absolutely not, you know, and that's, you're exploring, but you know, it's really not something that's favorable to the other side. And they're going to, you know, that's going to be a huge miss for everybody involved. But the more plate appearances you get, the more hits you're going to have, and the more chances you have, the better you're going to get at reading pitches. So the more you do this, if you go into every single negotiation with a stance of, this is what I say, take it or leave it, you're never going to learn anything. If you constantly explore, what if I were to do this? What if they were to do this? How if we were to do this? And there's several examples that I could tell you of some extreme negotiations and really extreme, outlandish results that we've gotten by just exploring options, where someone wanted to move up a settlement date and my client really wasn't ready to move, and their house that they were having built wasn't ready. So we once negotiated for the buyer of someone's house to pay for them to live in a hotel for 60 days, in a very, very nice hotel. It cost them about $6,000 for 60 days. And they were willing to do that so that they could move in and get their kid in that school district before the school year started. So interesting stuff you can always get to if you're willing to explore everything and anything. So this is another thing you need to remember, is there's 182 games a year. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to sell homes and negotiate offers. You're going to face that same pitcher more than once. That person you're negotiating with today, if you're so hard and so solid and so firm in your stance that you will not even open up negotiations to have discussions, they're going to understand that. And they're going to not want to work with you. And vice versa. If you have someone coming at you that is take it or leave it, I have an investor and he has a bottomless pit of money and he's going to offer cash and he's going to get what he wants, you're going to remember that person. And you're going to know that this is going to be a very difficult negotiation. And, you know, I've dealt with this person before and they're not very easy to deal with. Successful players' careers last over 15 years. Are you looking to win one game, or are you looking to build a career worthy of the Hall of Fame? Are you trying to win this game for your client in a manner that is going to just dominate, and then you can pat yourself on the back and say, man, I really nailed that one? Or are you trying to help thousands of customers? Are you trying to help their friends and their family members to try to get what they need to sell their home and get to where they want to be, which is the end goal? You know, in the end, that's where you should be. You should be looking at this in the bigger picture all the time, to say, I have this one client, we need to be flexible, we need to understand options, and we need to help them get to where they want to be. But we also have to understand there's another party involved, and they need to get what they want out of this as well, which is a happy, healthy home in the place that they expected, in the condition that they expected. And it has to feel good for everyone, like I said, when they're at the settlement table and they're exchanging phone numbers, so that they can say, oh, when you turn that switch on in the basement, it does this. That's the greatest conversation I just sit back and watch, because I know that we've done our job correctly if they've gotten to that point. That is all that I have. Does anyone have any thoughts or any questions about what we've went over?
It's Robert again. You have to look at their competition down the street. You know, they're not the only house for sale. And a lot of it has to do with the remarks, the description of the house, to make it, you know, not to over embellish it, but to have something special about that house. The pictures, you know, you have to say you're going to, you know, video to take the pictures. You're going to do it professionally, on and on and on, so forth. So they have to they have to be more realistic about where they are relative to their competition. That's just my thought.
I don't disagree with any of that. And, you know, part of the first negotiation is with the seller. And it is saying to the seller, I know you want $300,000, but, you know, the market will only bear about 275. The highest sale in your community was 275. You have to be able to creatively ask them, what makes $300,000 so important to you?
Yeah,
If
well,
you just want to be the highest sale in your neighborhood, what does that do for you? Because it's going to be extremely difficult to attain. It may not even be able to be attained. So if we were to get to 275, you know, what is your end goal? Are you trying to move somewhere, or do you just want to cash out everything you possibly can and you feel that this is the way to do that? You have to be skillful in the questions that you ask to help them understand without saying, you're never going to do it. $300,000 is too much. The highest sale is 275. Why is yours better? Right? Calm, probing, listening, all the skills that you need to do in order to help them understand what they're even saying. Because sometimes they don't. And they think that my house is a 10 out of 10 and I should be getting $300,000 in a market that will only bear 275 because, you know, my house is just the best. If you can get to a point where you can calmly ask and probe, get to the right questions, where are you trying to be? Why is that important to you? Tell me more about that. These are all phrases that you can constantly use over and over again to get to what is the most important. Even though a client will list 10 things that are important to them, you then have to negotiate which one is the most important and which is the least important. We went over an example earlier where this house was going to be sold for $300,000, but they said they also wanted to be, they had to have $300,000 and they had to be in Asheville, North Carolina by July 1st in order to see the birth of their first grandchild. And it was very difficult for me to address directly with them, saying that I need to understand which is the most important here, because these are two very different goals: to sell it quickly and to get the most amount of money. So tell me which one is the most important. And they constantly said both are equally as important. And when I asked them, if we received an offer for $299,000, you would miss the birth of your first grandchild, it triggered something in them to say, you're right, I might be a little flexible on that one, but I'm not flexible on the other. I have to be there. So it's really a difficult process, but one where you ask the right questions and you probe, you can get to help them understand what it is they're saying and help them understand what's really the most important thing to them. And that's the key to all this.
Sorry. You know, Mike, you had mentioned about everybody's house always being the best. And it reminds me of Floyd Wickman and the heavy-duty nails. Our house is built with heavy-duty nails. One thing we used to do that was interesting to negotiate was I'd bring a female agent along with me, and each of us would take a side. So one of us would say that it's too high or there's something wrong, and the other would take the opposite tact. And we'd argue with each other rather than arguing with the client. And that sometimes worked effectively.
I've done the same. We had our top agent in our office who was the #1 Century 21 agent in the state of Delaware. She would come with me, and we were two totally different personalities. I'm extremely type A, math-brained, you know, adding up the numbers and getting to what you need. And she was a lot softer. She more art-brained. She would walk around and tell them how wonderful their house was and the beautiful and the decorative this and that. And I cared nothing about that. This is what the house is worth. This is what it'll sell for. And it was amazing to see, especially when you have a couple, you have a husband and wife that are across the table from you. One of them is just like you, and one of them is just like her. So you can, if you come at one angle, you're going to lose one of them.
Absolutely true. Anyone else have any other questions for Mike? We'll pause for a second just in case. And Mike, in the meantime, I want to thank you so much for doing this today. It was wonderful. Great job.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate the time and I appreciate it. I hope everybody can learn a little bit from this. And this time, I know that negotiations right now is probably the best skill that you could possibly have. Even though it's a seller's market, you're going to need to rise above every other agent that's trying to list properties at this moment. That's where the negotiation skills come in.
It's true.
So I wish everybody the best. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, Lauren. Talk to you soon.